Welcome to Far More Beautiful, Kintsugi for the world. And I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement. I acknowledge that this day I am standing on the lands called Nyungar Wajak Buja, and I honor and pay respect to the past, present, and future traditional custodians and elders of this country and all country connected to it. I also honor and pay respect to the country that lies between our hearts, the inner landscape of our interconnectedness. And I do this with gratitude for how it is possible for us to come together in this way. Right here, right now, we are in a real place. So how today's gonna go, we're gonna do a very, very quick check-in with each other. I'm going to set a little context for the conversation. We're going to then have a breakout conversation. Then I'm going to set a little more context. We're going to have a second breakout and end with a little discussion on beauty, hope, and healing before we close and you go the rest of your day. So let's begin with the story of Kintsugi. And I combed the web because there are so many variations of it, and I found one very short and sweet and adorable one, which I'm going to share with you now. So, Kintsugi. Though we may keep a little quiet about this, especially when we're young, we tend deep down to be rather hopeful that we will eventually manage to find perfection in a number of areas. We dream of one day securing an ideally harmonious relationship, deeply fulfilling work, a happy family life, and the respect of others. However, life has a habit of dealing us a range of blows and leaving our fine dreams in shattered fragments all over the floor. It's at these moments of disillusionment that we might turn our minds to a concept drawn from Japanese philosophy, and in particular from the Zen Buddhist approach to ceramics. Now, over the centuries, Zen masters developed an argument that pots, cups, and bowls that had become damaged shouldn't simply be neglected or thrown away. They should continue to be given our respect and attention and be repaired with enormous care. The process symbolizing a reconciliation with the flaws and accidents of time, and at the same time reinforcing some of the big underlying themes of Zen. The word given to this tradition of ceramic repair is Kintsugi. Kin meaning golden, and sugi meaning joinery or repair. It means literally to join with gold. Now in Zen aesthetics, the broken pieces of an accidentally smashed pot should carefully be picked up, reassembled, and then glued together with lacquer infused with a very luxuriant gold, silver, or platinum powder. There should be no attempt to disguise the damage. The point is to render the fault lines simple and strong. The precious veins of gold are there to emphasize that the breaks themselves have a rich merit and beauty all of their own. Now and I think I should advancing my slide here. Yeah. Okay, back up. 1 second. Stand by for technical details. The origins of Kintsugi are said to date to the 1300s, when the then shogun of Japan broke his favorite tea bowl and, distraught, sent it to be repaired in China. But on its return, he was horrified by the ugly metal staples that had been used to join the broken pieces. And he charged his craftsmen with devising a more appropriate solution. What they came up with was a method that didn't disguise the damage, but made something properly artful out of it. Kintsugi belongs to the ideals of wabi-sabi, which cherishes what is simple and unpretentious, especially if it has a rustic, weathered, or aged quality. A story is told of one of the great proponents of wabi-sabi, a guy called Sen no Rikyu, a philosopher monk. On a journey through southern Japan, he was once invited to dinner by a host who thought he would be impressed by an elaborate and expensive antique tea jar that had been brought from China. But Rikyu didn't even seem to notice it, and instead spent his time chatting and admiring other things. In despair at this lack of interest, once Rikyu had departed, the devastated host smashed the jar to pieces and retired to his room. But the other guests more wisely gathered the fragments and stuck them together through Kintsugi. When Rikyu came next to visit, the philosopher turned to the repaired jar and with a knowing smile exclaimed, "Now it is magnificent." So today, let's explore that magnificence. Most pottery goes through fire, and so do we. This is what life is about. We come through moments of transformation, and we emerge on the other side. However, sometimes we get cracked and fractured, and sometimes we're completely shattered. Life includes the story of fire, the fire within us, the heat, the source of heat, light, and energy, also burns away the dross, what no longer serves us. And sometimes, after we've been through the fire, we have to sit for a while in the ashes. Doing our ashes work is doing our grief work, and it is essential. This is where we find back the shards, so we may connect them. Now, what I want to invite you to do now for a moment is reflect. We all have our stories of being burned and broken. And so I want you to reflect for a moment on your own. When you burned, when you broke, but eventually realize that it was a blessing in disguise. But just take a moment and reflect. Have you got any more people? No, we have chats. All right. So since we are we just three of us? Yes. I'm actually not going to put us into a breakout group because we are a breakout group. So I will invite Pat and Sitzel to unmute. Thank you. All right. And so what I'd like to invite us each to do is to share at least one of our stories of precious scars. Now, I think we probably want to turn off the recording for this.
Yeah, I can stop. Okay, we're recording again. Yeah.
I will go back to our slides in a moment. Okay. Welcome, new friends. We've just come out of our breakout room where we have shared stories of healing of our precious scars from our broken and shattered places. So sorry we didn't let you in until now, but that was that was personal and it wouldn't have been appropriate. So welcome now. So we're in part 2. Welcome to the latecomers. And
there's an Allison as well coming in.
Oh, hi. Welcome, Allison. And so what we're going to do now is part 2. So welcome to part 2. Here we go. Sharing, and play. There we go. So welcome back for those of us from the breakouts, and welcome to you new who are here with us now. And hopefully this presentation will work. All right. So for Kat and for Sidzil, who looks like Moira, but it's really Sidzil, what did you sense or hear or notice or learn from what we just did? Just a quick feedback. Either one of you, or I'll call on you.
Well, I guess it's about looking at a scar on from different angles, I guess, and looking at what you learn from it and how you can build value out of it. That's what I would say.
And Kat, for you? You're still
sorry, yeah, to just find my mood. I think it's that this thing that really struck me was the thing that I said at the end, and that was what came through with what you shared. It just the visual thing, as I just realized that gold in the Kintsugi is the surrender.
Yeah, it's essential, and and that you did surrender is what brings the strength eventually. This holding that we do, this controlling, is perhaps what gets most in the way of our healing.
Yeah. That's what it looks like. Yeah.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you
Thanks.
very much. All right. So here we are in 2020. Sense making, anyone? That's supposed to get a laugh, but you're all muted. So I see some smiles anyway. Yeah. So I wanted to share this lovely quote by Mark Twain, who said in the 1800s, "It's no wonder that truth is stranger than fiction. After all, fiction has to make sense." The world is really not making sense. Now, the point I want to make about that is that, as we all know, we're at a pivotal moment in our species' history. And in order to make wise, kind, and intelligent choices, we need first to be able to make sense of the world. So we live in an extremely challenging time, perhaps the most challenging time in history. We are at a moment where exponential technology is meeting exponential socioeconomic breakdown. And this, in a word, is overwhelming for most of us. We talked a little bit about heartbreak, and it's like, okay, so, and you guys heard about my 2019 story, so I'm like, even more heartbreak life? Really? Really? 2020. And I'm sure you've all seen the memes going around about the craziness of this year. It's like nothing else that we've ever experienced, perhaps the weirdest year ever. So in times of VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, do we fight? Do we fly? Do we freeze? With all of this amazing and crazy stress. So what I want to share about that is that fight, flight, or freeze is the biological response to perceived threat, and many of us have been frozen along the way. This freezing is not apathy. It's not powerlessness. What happened is that an internal shutdown was triggered when our coping mechanisms were overwhelmed. And this happened often when we were children, and certainly happened in our ancestral lines. And those imprints run in us in other than conscious ways and affect our behaviors. So many of us who felt like I should be doing something, I should be responding to the world, I should be, and we were shut down, we were frozen. This is not something to be blaming ourselves for. As a matter of fact, illumination and compassion is what is being called for, not shaming, and especially within ourselves. You know what you just said about surrender, Kat. This is huge. If we can surrender without blaming ourselves or without putting ourselves down, just go, I can't, and it's all right. It's all right for us to sit in the ashes for a moment and find those pieces back. So I just wanted to say a moment because something about freezing, because this is the aspect of a biological response that we often forget, that most of us have gone into during the course of this year. Right? So this quote I found from Charles Eisenstein, which I absolutely loved. He said, "No one's ever completely broken. It's just a matter of how much has to fall apart before the ember of life is exposed to the air and reignites." I love this. So back to the 2020s, where we are now. And Dorothy said, "Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore." Nope, we're not. There is no going back, and who knows what the new normal is. I mean, I don't. Do any of you? Raise your hand if you know what the new normal is. So, last year, we lost the brilliant and beautiful novelist and essayist Toni Morrison. And she did some extraordinary writing about times of crisis. And this is one thing that she said that I wanted to share with you today. She said, "I know the world is bruised and bleeding, and though it is important not to ignore its pain, it is also critical to refuse to succumb to its malevolence. Like failure, chaos contains information that can lead to knowledge, even wisdom, like art." And this inspired me to respond, actually, and I had a little postscript to her words. I wrote this: "Consider for a moment the warp and weft of the outrageously rich and magnificently varied tapestries of our lives and cultures, our ways of knowing and being. These too are being rapidly reduced to data, yet another resource to be mined, another landscape to be colonized and manipulated. Now with the fearsome machinery of AI and its attendant alphabet soup of technological power tools, which are being tasked again with the unquestioned agenda to monetize everything and everyone. Unless we choose instead to heal ourselves back to wholeness, our lungs and our spines, our senses and our voices, our own and those of our planet. Inwardly at first, and then outwardly. We can choose to simply turn away from the endless, futile games of domination and conquest that we've allowed to traumatize us for millennia. We can move patiently through our healing journeys into new ways of being a planetary species, even a harmonious one. And we can choose at last to embrace ourselves as humans, loving co-stewards of this place where we belong, this achingly beautiful and mysterious and generous Earth. So what I'd like to do now is send us, and now we actually have enough people for breakouts. And given the context of our Kintsugi, of the golden joinery, of the broken pieces, I'm going to invite you to entertain 3 questions. Now you can do 1 or 2 or all 3 of them, but because we are pressed a bit for time, actually we may have a bit more than I thought. Let's see, so we've got, so we can do this for about 15 minutes. And here are the questions. Question number 1. How do we make sense of the world so we can make the wiser, kinder choices we must make now as a species? And 2, how do we come together to collaborate in the real, not just virtual world, nurture our collective intelligence, and stay meaningfully connected. And the third, what are some of the unconscious, unquestioned assumptions that are getting in the way of our thriving, in the way of what we know is possible? And how might we change them? How might we move beyond the idea of things never changing? Okay, so what I'll do is I will put you guys into breakout rooms. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I guess a group of 2 and a group of 3. Actually, we'll do 2 groups of 3 because I'll join one of you. Okay, so I'm going to stop. Oops, I'm actually going to stop sharing. How do I do that? Stop sharing.
You go up on the top.
Yeah, except that it's just completely weird for me. Okay, up on the top.
Do it?
It's not doing it.
I can stop.
Okay, there we go. All right.
Okay.
There we go. You got me. Thanks. All right. So there's the breakout rooms. Here we go. So I will paste the questions in the chat. But for those of you who are new, why don't you begin by introducing yourselves to each other? So Jude and Andrew and Allison, we haven't met you yet, so please introduce yourselves to each other. And I'm going to create the rooms, and we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes. Okay. There'll be, so rotationally, you want to give everybody about 5 minutes of airtime. Be nice, 4 minutes of airtime anyway. And then there will be a notice for a 1 minute return to the big room, okay? There you go.
I'll stop the recording.
Thanks. So welcome back, everyone. Anybody want to share some wonderful insight or nugget that came from your session? Just unmute yourself and put your hand up and I'll call on you. And if you are not showing yourself, just unmute yourself. And if you don't, I will call on you, so. I can start. What I loved about our session is that we actually covered all 3 of the questions in this short period of time. And I'm always just amazed and impressed at the quality and caliber of human beings who show up at NINA. So I want to acknowledge my my co-participants in the breakout session for your depth and insight and willingness. So thank you. Who wants to say something?
Yeah, I'm happy to say something. Beautiful conversation with Kat and Jude. We, on the other hand, only covered the first question. But quite a deep conversation around that, and I guess our combined experiences in how we navigate making sense of the world. And I think it was just a beautiful sharing. And I suppose one common thread was just the value of space to allow us to connect and make sense of the world through that. So, yeah.
Beautiful. You guys talked about space. We talked about time.
Beautiful.
Great. Anybody else want to share something? You don't have to. I was only joking that I was going to force you. I'm not going to do that. Okay. So really, to close us today, I just want to share one last thing with you, which is, let me share my screen. Okay, it doesn't let me do that while I'm preparing a presentation. Okay, share screen. There we go. Share. So yeah, this is what I want to leave you with today, which is that as we heal the brokenness wherever we find it, let us lead with tenderness. And let us lead from our precious scars, not from our wounds, our precious scars, because they're gorgeous, and so are we. May you all be strong and stronger for at the broken places, and may the light keep shining through. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate you showing up. It's been wonderful. So thank you, and cheers, and have a lovely, lovely afternoon or evening wherever you are.